Hello, welcome back if you've been around for a while, or welcome if you're new. In today's video, I'm going to do a video that's been somewhat requested, although I'm going to have to break it up into chunks just for my sanity. And that is sharing some stories of my time in Australia. If you don't know, I spent a couple months in Australia in 2006, and then I spent a year in Australia from like 2009 to 2010. So the story I'm going to share today is specifically my journey from Kakadu National Park down to Alice Springs. Let's get into it. So if you're unfamiliar with Australian geography, Kakadu National Park is at the northern, like, middle part of the country, and Alice Springs is almost smack dab in the middle of the outback of the country. Alice Springs is most known for being really close to Uluru, which is the big rock you see in a lot of pictures, and by big rock, I mean, like, giant rock. It's huge. But at any rate, I had a fair amount of adventures going from Kakadu to Alice Springs. There is almost nothing to see or do on that drive, just empty outback. Straight road for miles and miles and miles. I think if I remember right, and I might be making this up, but I feel like I saw a sign that said for like one part of it, it is the longest like straight shot section of road in the world or in Australia. Things get muddled. But at any rate, like legit just absolutely nothing, kind of barren, not wasteland. There was like some grass and scrub, and we would just pull off to the side of the road and camp on the side of the road. And when we woke up, often there would be a ton of like sheep or cattle around us, because a lot of that land is used for sheep and cattle grazing. And it's just so big that when these giant ranchers need to round up their animals, they'll actually use like helicopters and all kinds of different things to bring them in, because the land is just vast. But at any rate, the drive itself, if I remember right, was supposed to take about 13 hours. An important note is I was doing it during the summer months there, and in the van we were driving in, there was no AC. It had broken before we got into Kakadu, and then we got it fixed, and it broke again either while we were in Kakadu or as we left. And as a point of reference, the temperatures in the outback while we were there were like hovering around like 104 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit in a van with like 8, 9, 10 people and no air conditioning. So we were making really frequent stops just on the side of the road to kind of get out and stretch. And anytime we saw a gas station, we stopped. But often those gas stations were something like 250 kilometers apart. So yeah, it wasn't like short periods of time in the van. It was fairly significant. And right out of the gates, when we were leaving Kakadu, we stopped. I don't even remember why. Maybe somebody had to go to the bathroom. And I was wearing just cheap flip-flops, you know, like the foam flip-flops, no structure to them. I jumped out of the van into what I thought was grass. And it was grass, but it was like these hollow, dried out reeds of grass. So almost like a chopstick is what I kind of compare it to. And it impaled through the flip-flop and up into my foot. And immediately I was like, ah! And like pulled my foot up. I don't have any pictures of this because it hurt and I didn't take any. But it was like foot, flip-flop, and the skewer went through both. So we pulled it out, hydrogen peroxide, all that good stuff. And that was really all I could do. Again, we were in the middle of nowhere, so unless you want like a helicopter ride to a hospital or like a life flight, it's not happening. The good thing was it didn't go very deep into my actual foot, and I knew I was going to be able to keep it fairly clean, at least until we got into Alice Springs and I was able to take a shower again. So I just was very careful about keeping the area clean, using rubbing alcohol, which, whew, if I felt like anything had gotten into it, and trying to keep it dry and not touching like anything dirty. But we were camping out, so it was a real challenge, and my foot hurt. My whole foot throbbed. I was taking ibuprofen, watching it really carefully, because if it got infected, I was going to have to do something. And yeah, that was really all I could do. Luckily, nothing worse than that happened, other than like the arch of my foot was tender for probably a solid month afterward. But that was sort of how we started this leg of the journey off, and I was a little upset because I knew when we got to Uluru there would be a fair amount of hiking, and I'd kind of already figured my foot was going to hurt, and it did, but I made it work. I wasn't going to miss out on the opportunity, so all's well that ends well. But that was sort of the first chance, that was sort of the first occurrence on this memorable stretch of drive that otherwise wouldn't have been very memorable. Like I said, it was a very straight road. We did stop and get lots of pictures, so I'll put a few of them in here just so you can get an idea of what I'm talking about when I say there's nothing around and the road is just really straight, flat nothingness. Because it was so hot, when we would stop for gas, or petrol as they call it there, we would go into these small like truck stops and see what kind of snacks they had. And because it's so hard for them to get new inventory, I'm talking like a single popsicle would be like $8. And after being in a car with that many people with no air conditioning for that long, it seemed like a totally reasonable price to pay. So I can't tell you how many $8 like paddle pops I ate while I was on the stretch of the road. But about 3 or 4 hours after I had hurt my foot, we saw a guy walking on the side of the road. I only have one picture of him, and he did let us take it, but he wouldn't look for it. And this is him. And as you can see, he was walking on the side of the road with like an old, it's not a truck bed, but it's something, you know, like the back axle of some kind of vehicle. And he had it rigged up to 2 camels, and they were just walking. And a couple of us tried to engage him in conversation, and he was a little chatty. He did accept some water. We gave him some snacks. And, you know, after we sort of did the introductions, we were like, hey, like, you know, where are you going? And he didn't really answer. And someone else said, well, you know, how long do you expect it to take you to get there? Because like I said, he was a couple hours south of Kakadu. So he still had, I don't even know how many hours walking. I mean, if he was 4 hours south of Kakadu, he still had like 9 hours of drive time. But I'll never forget his response to where are you going and how long is it going to get you? How long is it going to take you to get there was, I don't fucking know and I don't fucking care. And after that, he really didn't want to talk to us anymore. And he started to walk away before we had even gotten back in the vehicle. So that's just kind of a funny little part of the story as well. But I also won't forget one night on the drive, because we stretched it out. There wasn't a lot to see and do, but we weren't in a hurry. We ran across this guy. His name was Russell. Lived in the middle of nowhere, but he had signs up that he had essentially like a snake/reptile farm. And for a small price, this guy would like give you a tour, talk to you about all the snakes he had. They were all non-venomous. He didn't have any venomous variety. You know, talk to you about the snakes, teach you a little bit about them, talk to you about like where they came from, because some were people had them as pets and couldn't keep them anymore because they got so big. Others were like rescues. They weren't truly pets. But yeah, they'd all been kind of around people or harmed by people, and he, out of just the goodness of his heart, was taking care of them, which is why he accepted donations to, you know, get a tour, and he would let us hold them. So I'll put some pictures here of me holding the different snakes. He had like carpet pythons. I can't remember any of the other variety. He had a lot of carpet pythons. I do remember that. But it was just this really interesting experience, and we all had a really good time. Some of the people were really scared of snakes, but they still found the experience really interesting. And he said, you know, for like another $10, I'll let you camp here on my land, and I'll let you hang out tonight in my barn. Which seems like a weird offer in hindsight, but he said, you know, I have a really big projector, there's a fridge with cold drinks, and, you know, for the $10, and it had a bathroom in it, so we could like shower, go to the bathroom, yada yada. And so we're all like, yeah, that sounds great. So we go into his barn, and come to find out he distilled his own liquor. I did not partake, but some of the other people did. And he also decided to screen a movie for us. And the movie he screened, I think, is called Wolf Creek. Oh, if it's not Wolf Creek, I'll put the name here, but I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. Which is a story about backpackers and tourists basically getting murdered by an Australian in the outback of Australia. Which, I don't like scary movies at the best of time, but I surely do not like scary movies about murderous outback Australians while I'm in the outback of Australia. And I'll never forget, like, kind of the peak part of the movie. He came out, because he'd gone into his house to, like, make dinner and stuff, but he came out and did this, like, freaky laugh. Everybody else thought it was funny. I was terrified, but it's sometimes in life you just have to roll with things. He was really nice. If you know Australians' sense of humor, this was that encompassed. He was the nicest guy. He obviously didn't hurt any of us. He brought us all out cold water, didn't charge us extra. He did charge the people that had the distilled alcohol for the alcohol that they had, but I think that's totally reasonable. I'm sure it's not a cheap process, although it could be. But yeah, it was just such a unique experience. I'll probably never have one like that again in my life. I think that's sort of the benefit to traveling maybe in your 20s, but I think more than being in my 20s, it was just like single, kind of unattached, definitely wasn't a parent yet, wasn't in a relationship. But yeah, it was just such a good time. And then we got into Alice Springs sort of uneventful after the rest of the drive. And yeah, we saw, Uluru. Even though my foot hurt, I did some dressing on it and did the walk around the base. I did not climb it. I don't know that they still let people climb it, but if you're not familiar, the Aboriginal group in that area, that's a sacred part of their life, and they don't want people to climb it. So when I was there, you were able to climb it if it wasn't too windy. But it was very well known. There were signs posted everywhere that it was the Aboriginal people's preference that you did not. They didn't mind people, as far as I know, walking around the base of it, but they didn't want you to climb it. So I didn't do that. I just walked around the base of it. But at any rate, that is one small part of my Australian trip. I'm sure I'll do another story about my trip, or another part of my trip some other time, but hopefully that was good enough for today. We'll talk to you next time. Bye!